listening to a Frozen Truth production.
And welcome back. It's Tuesdays with Moors. I'm Justyn Payne, and this is episode 8. Episode 8. We're actually starting to roll a little bit along, and so we're grateful for everybody that's been on the journey. I also want to invite you to continue to share this and have conversations, talking points. We put out a couple of little tidbits and highlights here and there, but sometimes it's best in the comments. You let us know what highlight and or topic that resonated with you, if there was something that struck a chord with you and or just sort of like just stood out, and help us know that mattered to you. And so we're grateful for the feedback we are getting, but also you can go ahead and engage us there in the comments and sections and stuff like that, because we do watch those and we try to be mindful of the engagement we have. And today, in this time, we were actually recognizing that it is not easy to see the freedoms of our day and age because of even generational experiences and generational perspectives. How often one generation has lived through a monumental moment, and then the next generation has not experienced that, and how that affects our worldviews.
That's a consistent factor in human history, period. We were talking about, for instance, the generation that came of age between, let's say, 1960 and 1980, and then the fact that you have a generation before that, say from 1935 to 1965 or whatever, well, that's not an exact number, but from, say, 45 to 65. And the differences in the perspectives of those generations. And you see it consistently. The people who moved here from Amsterdam in the 1600s, right, landed at Plymouth Rock and set up their colony and wanted to be able to worship the way they wanted. Within 2 generations, there was a group of people who didn't see things the same way. Mm. And readjustments had to be made. And speaking of readjustments, I want to show off my T-shirt.
Go ahead.
It says, "In my defense, I was left unsupervised." So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And I love that. That is completely timeless, because some people, I have young children, and there's nothing worse than when they get quiet.
I can't believe it. Yeah, it's too quiet.
Or the second best part would be when you see your young child walking by you with a stool and doesn't say anything to you.
Okay, I have to ask, have you seen the thing Bernie Mac does about raising his sister's children?
Milk and cookies.
Milk and cookies, yes. That's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
So my son, he does stuff like that, where he walks up past me, looking at me with this sort of "I'm not talking to you" face, and then he goes and puts on his little Puss in Boots big eyes, his little puppy dog eyes to his mother, and says, "Mommy, can I have a treat?" And I said, "AJ, what did I say earlier?" He looks at me and says, "I was not talking to you.
Oh my goodness.
I was talking to mommy." Now, he's 2, and it's like, on one side of my head, I'm like, I want to come at him like he's 15 years old, and
that's like, that reminds me of Bernie Mac saying, "Okay, come on, bust a move."
Exactly. So I back up. You were looking at me like I'm not here. Like, this ain't my house. Like, I wasn't talking to you. Oh, okay. So who am I? Oh, that's what it is. I've been not only demoted. So, okay. So this little 2-year-old.
You are not a likely source of the gratification of his desires. Therefore, he's directing his attention to that more likely source of the gratification, right?
Oh,
and angering you in the process is not something that computes to him yet.
He's actually confident. Like, he's like, "I'm talking to mom, so even if you are angry, I still got mom to back me up."
Oh my goodness. Yeah. the thing that kills me when Bernie Mac talks about it is he says, "I'm just saying what you're thinking."
Check and see if the white meat's there. So
yeah, exactly. Remember, we talked about the little 2-year-old looking at him like she's looking down her nose at him.
I'm like, how you gonna look at me like I'm short? Like, now, dealing with these kids has helped me. There's days I do walk off and don't even say anything. Number one, just to keep my sanity, but two, to just contemplate life. I'm like, did a 2-year-old really just say that to me? Huh? What am I gonna do? Like,
you have one that's 2, and how old's the other one?
4.
4.
Okay. And then another one on the way.
Okay.
And so we are blessed in this space of many patter feet that'll be around the house, but left unsupervised. Oh yeah, being up to their own devices is sometimes very wonderful to behold, and I always think about this other space of how some people raise their children through the lens of their trauma, and they forget about the lens of their joy.
Sure. In other words, they're consumed with not making the same mistakes that were made in raising them, let us say.
Right. It's for one. Like, I like this quote: instead of being worried about giving your kids what you never had, teach them what you never knew. And
that's so good.
There's been a generation of people that, in my generation or a little bit before, where we just, well, I never had this, so I gave my kids everything. I gave my kids these toys, and I didn't have this toy going up. So then, unfortunately, we have a big, giant generation of people who are not appreciative of anything halfway in life. And then I see a generation of people that are just afraid of what any scratch will do to their children, which is fair to be mindful of, but it's also not fair to the child to let them engage with the process of processing suffering or processing pain or processing their own emotions in the spectrum of it.
I remember not too long ago reading an article where somebody was talking about the fact that lots of little kids eat dirt. If they're left to themselves, they'll just go out and make a mud pie and actually eat it.
Straight up.
You know? I don't remember ever doing that, but I can believe that
But it didn't kill me.
Well, and the thing that this guy was arguing, I believe he had a background in biology, was that there's the possibility that that's developing immunities in your body. Making you less likely to get sick.
In that, there's other articles of why kids hate green vegetables or certain vegetables, because of the bitter quality of vegetables is linked to their flight response towards poison.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
And so it's like some sort of like Homo sapien reaction and or like very bare bones instinctual place of why green vegetables at a certain time are repulsive to kids, regarding that palatability. And there's some instinctual things that I believe have to happen that we as adults, and I say that as adults because you could be, grandparent, grand uncle, there's some amazing family members that contribute to the input of kids. And so they got to scrape their knee. They got to cry a little bit. They have to be not unsupervised, but unassisted on some things, so that way they are able to process what it takes for them to live essentially without you one day.
Well, you've had the problem of dealing with helicopter children raised by helicopter parents.
Right.
As a teacher, so have I.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a temptation to throw up one's hands and just say, okay, I hope life teaches you what I can't teach you, what you refuse to learn from me.
The temptation really is for me to not say, for me to say to the parent, when they're asking me questions like, how come this is happening? How come that is happening? And my main answer is because of you. Because you have not allowed them the space to figure it out on their own or develop their own develop their own mechanisms. They rely solely on your mechanisms and your fear of whatever you're fearing. And they haven't developed that you mentioned on a previous episode how a lot of kids have become so maladaptive to problem solving. Like I sat down and just praised my daughter one day when she said, I think it was like a puzzle or something, and she said, "Dad, here, I solved the problem." And when she said it like that, not just the puzzle or whatever, she says, "I solved the problem." I just gave her so much credit because I'm like, I want you to see problems and recognize that problems have a solution. You may not always have the solution, but there is a solution that you can work into it. And I celebrated that for her.
Sure. Because
some people just say, well, I can't do it because it's not in front of me, and so therefore I give up everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they
There's
just
way
stop.
too much of that. I wouldn't, as a college teacher, I didn't encounter parents very often. Right.
I'm surprised. I don't know why do they choose to stop at college, man? That's the best time. Y'all should just be in their business.
Right. Have more fun.
Because I mean, as in secondary, though, that was interesting because what would happen is that we would have meetings with parents that are convinced how their kids are, and I've literally seen kids sit at the table with a sort of dual look on their face, where I'm like with them locked eyes, like, I know how you are in my class, Johnny. You know how to do better. And then Johnny also has his look on his face like, yeah, but I've been pulling this line for so long. Do I really want to stop?
See, that's so different from how my father interacted with teachers. You know, my father, whatever the teacher told him, he believed that.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, there was one particular time I remember for a math class, and my father asked the teacher about the math class, and he said, he told me you're failing. He said, and you're failing because of your inattentiveness in class. I was like, you know, didn't even question me about it. He just told me what he said, and he left it at that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was enough. I mean, I knew exactly what he was saying. Pay attention in class and don't fail this class. It's ridiculous for you to be failing this class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a way, it was weird because now looking back on it, it was both a vote of confidence and a reprimand at the same time.
Right.
You know, my father was clever that way.
It is not that anymore.
I know. That's what, yeah.
I have literally watched, it was during COVID, so I was like video conferencing in. So I was like, I was Oz. I was a guy on the screen teaching, but I had a video feed into the classroom. It was a very delicate way that we had figured out at the time because I was still at this moment immunity compromised for the sake of COVID and going back to school. But I was able to teach and figured out a solution for me to teach virtually live. So then I see a student engage in a behavior that was not necessary. The adult in the room just absolutely gently reminds them to be on task. And the student pushes back. I am watching the entire thing and literally writing an email to their parent in real time of what I am seeing. I later get on a conference call with that parent, and that parent says, well, that's not what he said. I said, ma'am.
How old is the child?
They were 15, 16 maybe. And I said, ma'am, that's not what he said, but I'm telling you what I watched. Well, you saw wrong. Oh, wow. Like, it got
Did you have a recording of it?
I could not record for the sake of that particular laws that were in place of recording, but it was very just sort of just dropping. Like, I really just dropped in my seat like, wow, a grown adult is watching your child's behavior and you not being present still side with whatever story they're giving you. And two adults, not even just there's still an adult in the room that participated.
You have two witnesses.
Two adult witnesses. And it was still not corrected in the parent's eyes. They just immediately went with whatever the child said.
Well, you both got it in from my baby.
yeah, there's something wrong with y'all. And I'm like, wow, okay, all right. So, and when people ask, why, this is very opinionated, by the way, but people ask, what is wrong with America's education system? I would say nothing.
Go ahead, please.
In my general sense, as a general lens, the educators and the people that are at work now are working relentlessly to find somehow, some way to save what is left. But it's I'll say it this way. There's a beautiful art piece of a machine that is scooping hydraulic fluid into itself. Okay. And it's leaking hydraulic fluid. But the rate of the leakage is greater than the rate that the machine is designed to scoop it back into itself. Okay. So it eventually dies. The education system is like that machine that's trying to scoop itself back together, but too much is leaking from around it. And the leakage is within the community's standards and or our generational standards towards adult respect, community standards of morality, so to speak, and how children should respond in that respect.
Okay, this leads me to a corollary. And C.S. Lewis, I'm trying to remember which book it's in, but he has, maybe in the Screw Tape Letters, where he talks about that in the Middle Ages, when you had a scholastic argument, people understood when, as a result of a certain kind of argument, you'd actually proved something.
Right. And
then Screw Tape, who of course is a demon, saying, with our more recent endeavors in the daily press, et cetera, we've convinced people that, finding the right answer is not possible. So what's going on is a number of conflicting answers, right? The question isn't whether or not something is true, as in the case of this student behaving one way and two people saying this is the way they're behaving, but whether or not, the information is strong or authentic or, right? So it's like
validating of their original opinion.
Exactly. Well, that would make it strong and authentic from the perspective. See, what struck me when you were talking about that woman, about the parent, is that she believes, I'm sure, that she's doing the right thing and standing up for her child.
Right.
And that's what makes it really rough, because in a way it may be misguided from my perspective, but she believes she's doing the right thing. But what she's really doing down the road is going to make her child's life much harder as an adult than she would want it to be, I think, if she is motivated by genuine regard for her child.
Well, most parents are raising their children out of the trauma that they've experienced and or the lens they've experienced. So it makes sense sometimes also where they're reflecting back of when I had a teacher and they didn't believe me when I didn't do anything. And so I'm immediately going to go on the far other side. But author Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, essentially one of those pillars is focused on seeking to understand or listening with the point of understanding. And that is a very lost segment of understanding. Like, this is why even our conversation is literally groundbreaking. For the sake of transparency, did we originally have like bullet points and a script and these are the things that we were going to talk about? Yes. And honestly, we kind of threw it out the window because our natural conversations have been so much more understanding built off of that. And things just build these great towers of interaction. And to me is more authentic versus me just giving a script. This is what we're going to talk about, and it's not quite that experience. But when we as a society do not, let's just say, listen for understanding, we're always listening for validation. So we walk in with an opinion, and if you don't validate my opinion, well, I'm walking out with everything and more. I'm going to rip you down and pull down your name because you didn't agree with me when I walked in with less information in the first place.
And the problem and the sad part there is the confusion is that validating your opinion and validating you are not the same thing. Right? If you want to do some research on what used to be possible, there is a firing line. I'm not talking to Justyn necessarily because I already know he understands this, but if anybody watching wants to check this out, there's an old firing line where Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine, and William F. Buckley, who is the founder of National Review, leading conservative publication then and now, are having a conversation. And it's a marvel. They listen to each other. They don't really step on each other in terms of conversation. I mean, I get it. People get excited and the conversations may have moments where it does things like this. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not listening. It means sometimes that the interaction and the intensity of it gets really exciting. That can descend into name calling and shouting and argument, and often too much of the time does, especially in commercial television these days, where people think that that's what the people who are putting it on think that's what the general public will respond to. I'm not convinced that's true.
Right.
Because the Hoover Institute is still showing William Buckley's firing line. You can go on YouTube and see any of them. Now, that show does not always maintain that high standard, right? But at its best, there were times where Buckley, who was no dummy, would have people on who had a point of view very different from his own, and they would actually talk, and they would actually listen to each other. The one with Hubert Humphrey is very good. There's also one where he interviews Muhammad Ali when Ali was waiting to see if the Supreme Court was going to let him box again.
Right.
And it's interesting because they start off, and you can tell Buckley is poking him a little bit, and Ali is defending himself. By the end of the conversation, though, it's clear they both enjoyed the conversation.
Right.
Things change. At one point, Ali says something, and Buckley says, "Fair point." And you can see it, them starting to meet, And it's the kind of thing that when I was on growing up, I mean, firing line was on every Sunday, and so you could see that on a regular basis, right?
Right.
I find it hard to. I lament the absence of that. There are still some examples of it. There is a show. I wish it was longer. It's called To the Contrary, hosted by Bonnie Urbay on PBS, where she'll have two women who are more leaning to the left, more liberal, whatever terms you want to use, and two women who are leaning to the right. And then she'll bring up an issue, and she does a pretty good job of being an even-handed moderator and letting all four women have a say. Sometimes they get into, serious interruptus, seriousness interruptusness, But anyway, but most of the time, it seems more genuine. It's a little bit, it's a more well-handled show. But once again, it's not on commercial television. It's on public broadcast. So it was firing line.
Right.
So I mean, if you're trying to sell soap, I wonder if the kind of rational dialogue that I'm talking about is even possible, given the people who are in charge of programming and the people who are trying to sell time to, who are advertisers, et cetera. Well, it needs more fireworks. Okay.
Well, in that last line you said, if you're trying to sell soap, my mind actually went to soap has changed.
That's true.
In the cleansing agent, because it's not about what it cleans, it's about what it smells like. Do you realize that soap commercials?
Once again, the truth is becoming clouded by soap bubbles.
Exactly. Whereas, if you see soap commercials now, it's not about how clean you get. I remember commercials about you're not fully clean unless you're zestfully clean, or Dial, or anti-mac.
Aren't you glad you used Dial? Don't you wish everybody did? Yes.
Yeah, and it was all about how it removed the dirt or removed the bacteria, and it kills all of the microbes. Now it's just about smelling like outside, or smelling like this, that, and the third.
Yeah, I remember. You reminded me now of the Fantastic ad. I don't use a bucket. I just use Fantastic. fantastic. It's not like the others. It's quick and it's strong. Dirt, grime, and grease are no match for its power.
Right.
You spray it, you wipe it, and dirt is gone.
Yes.
Nothing about what it smells like.
Right.
Just it leaves everything clean.
Even for my generation, the fact that pine sol, that like it smells like pine. That was generational breakthroughs.
I do like the way it smells. I like the way Fabuloso smells too.
I love
but now Fabuloso works.
But it
too.
works, you know. But I grew up on Comet, Ajax, Powder, you know, like some people still use Borax, you know, like there's no smell, just get the work done. And I think about that. That's
I have to ask. Okay, so you use Comet to clean something. Do you ever? It's like, did I get rid of all of it?
Oh man, like
Did I get rid of all the powder? There's always some residues.
there's
left
always
over.
Comet always had to like be rinsed off. There's always like a good rinsing, and most of the time I use Comet like in the kitchen or the bathroom.
Right, yeah.
So it's like at least I had a bucket to just like, get it all away, or not. You'd have this thick cake later on.
Right, exactly. So
You missed
I like
somewhere.
scrubbing bubbles for that.
Yeah, I knew where the bubbles were. But I use that as the analogy of, as a society, we don't want clean. We want what smells good to us. We want that which appeals to us. And it's too many times that, like, even in today's climate, is that I'm watching people give valuable information, but because of whatever side of the aisle that they stand on, they immediately shut it down as it can't possibly be true because it came from a what?
Exactly.
And it's like, wait a minute. Like, in my own patriotic perspective, the glory of American democracy is the design of multiple input to a common decision, not a common opinion, not a common, not an individualistic ideal, but a conglomerate, homogenous ideal that is created from out of many one, e pluribus unum, in every sense. So when we operate with a very, like, if you're not with me, then you're against me mentality on either side of your politics, it makes me very curious.
Makes me sad. And curious too, because it's... Now, interestingly, George Washington was opposed to having two parties. There was only one party, the Federalist Party, when he was elected president, and he was opposed to seeing it split into two parties and warned against it. And of course, Jackson and Hamilton are kind of the ringleaders of what became the initial Democratic Party with Jefferson and the initial Republican Party, although it wasn't called Republican. I realize the Republican Party under that name doesn't come into existence until the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Right. You had Whigs and
The Whigs
and other
Federalist and yeah.
yeah. But and of course, here's the other thing to bear in mind about contemporary politics over the roles shift.
Yep.
You know, at one point, that which was called democratic was much more about individual self-determination and less centralized government, and republicanism was more about centralized government, right? And then vice versa. It goes back and forth and goes back and forth. So, you know, I'm not a full-blown Hegelian, but looking at politics is enough to make me believe in it to some degree. I'll put it that way. But if the willingness to listen and consider is there, regardless, then something wonderful can happen, right? I've even had that happen on social media just because I said, okay, I'm not going to let this descend into an argument. I'm going to let them know that I'm hearing what they're saying. We're texting. I'm hearing what you're saying. It says, and you're misreading what I'm saying, right? And then sometimes, 1 out of 100 times, they'll actually enter into the conversation with me. And I did that with somebody. We were on opposite sides of the aisle, so to speak. We're not in politics, but at the end of it, he said, "You know, I enjoyed this." And I was like, "Yeah, thank you. I'm glad I did too."
That's the point. Like,
Yeah.
in his blessed state, opposition is designed for. I would like to say it is opposition that is what creates the sharpness of the mind. The book that I read says iron sharpens iron, or and the analogy is that there has to be contact of the iron in such that it can't have iron sharpening iron if they never touch. If they never meet at a point of friction, if they never meet at a point of contact. It is through the interaction and essentially for that which is being sharpened at the very minuscule level, things are being shaved off or rubbed away or pulled back so that when it is done, there is a new angle that is formed of the original substance. Mm-hmm. And when that substance comes into contact with a lesser substance, it penetrates it through, which we see in this cutting. This is the point of interaction, in my opinion. It is our interactions, or my interactions with other people, that when I'm allowing myself to essentially erode from my previous opinion or previous perspective to be molded into that which could be progressively forward in our society, I'm able to cut better. I'm able to penetrate the ideas and the thoughts and minds of people in a way that is productive.
Yeah, I have a good one for you. I heard this from a rabbi. And he was talking about that passage where it says about the sweat of your brow you will eat your bread, something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about your job, whatever it is you have to sweat to pay your way, to earn your living, is ultimately your blessing. Mm-hmm. And, of course, then he also tied in the fact that sweat gets toxins out of your system.
Right.
So, so if you're schlepping, to use the word he used, right, which means you're doing physical work, you're moving things around, you're working up a sweat, in a way, the potential exists for you to bless yourself by doing those things. Because for one thing, you're getting rid of toxins by sweating. You're also increasing your physical stamina, et cetera, et cetera. You're sharpening yourself.
Right.
Yet, we talked about Wally last time. There seems to be this tendency towards the people on the ship in Wally.
Right.
Where they don't have to dress themselves. They don't have to do anything. They just sit in a chair all the time. And push buttons to change their clothes and drink super protein shakes and, just get fat and happy, right?
Well, that's debatable because here it came to a place, even in that movie, where they almost were so pacified as a society on the axiom where they then thought they didn't realize they were as fat as they were.
No.
Until they finally got off the beaten path, so to speak. And so then he falls off the mobilized chair and looks and sees, hey, there are stars out here.
Right, exactly. He actually sees something besides the immediate sense experience that is taking him out of the larger perspective.
I didn't know we had a pool. I didn't.
Exactly. I like the part where he defies the machine and says, I don't want to survive. I want a life. And then later he's telling the children, says, they had farms. This is dirt. They used to plant things in this and grow pizza.
We're going to grow pizza. Yeah. That was a part of, ooh.
Now, what's interesting is, how's he going to feel when that garden doesn't come up the way he expects it to the first time? And he realizes how much work is involved. There was a show called the 1900 House where they took an English house and converted it from its present state back to 1900 specs and paid a modern family to live in it for a few months.
Oh, I'd love to check that out.
It was fascinating. And there were a number of adjustments that they really had a problem with. Hair care products. We assume hair care products, and the hair care products available in 1900 drove the women especially crazy, right? Because, imagine washing your hair with just plain soap. If you've ever done it, you know what happens.
Right.
It doesn't feel right. The other thing that was interesting was the father was talking about afterwards. He says, you have no idea how much more work anything is, even the simplest thing. If you want to make a piece of toast for yourself in the morning, you have to start a fire in the stove.
Right.
And if you don't have wood, you have to chop wood.
Down wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've got to put the wood in there. You've got to build a fire. You've got to get the fire going. The stove's got to get hot enough. Then you have to take a loaf of bread and slice the bread off.
Assuming you had bread.
Well, yeah, they would have bread in loaves because they could buy it from the bakery. They had
right.
bakeries, but they didn't have sliced bread.
Right.
Right, that
Slice your
comes
bread.
along with Henry Ford and mechanization and automatic. So you pass it down the what do they call it? The conveyor belt,
Conveyor
the
belt,
assembly
yeah.
line, and they get perfectly sliced bread. They don't have that in 1900.
There you go.
Right, and so. Yeah, and it's a fascinating show. The 1900 House. It was on a few years ago. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, if you can see it or not. But
that's where I get funny with people, because when people ask the question or surmise that their opinion that they mustered now would be just as valid in the time frame of which they reference, it is very alarming. To me, number one, on your lack of history. Number two, on your application of history. Because if you're going to assume that how you feel is exactly how it's been and how it should have been, and or if you were to go back in time and insert that opinion in that time frame, would you survive?
That is the question that has intrigued me over and over and over. I am fascinated by Voltaire, French philosopher.
Love him.
From the time period right before he died. He lived in the 1700s. He died a little bit after, I believe, the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm. And he said one of the most patriotic things I ever heard in my life is that I may not agree with your opinion, but I will die for you to defend it.
But now here's the thing to bear in mind. I look at him as heroic because he was. He had a patron, a woman that he was very much in love with, and who was very much in love with him. And she was married to a wealthy man. The wealthy man, they had an open marriage apparently, and he didn't care. And so Voltaire stayed in his house in Switzerland, which
French.
was neutral territory, which meant that Voltaire could write these incendiary pamphlets
Yes.
and speak the truth to power and then get out of town before the heat came.
Right.
Other people were not so lucky. And this is the thing. Can you stand up and speak the truth to power if you know they may just kill you? Richard Pryor had an observation about that I thought was really brilliant. He says, in a situation like that where somebody's pointing a gun at you, your hand is smarter than your brain is. Here, give me the rope. I'll tie myself up just fine. Is that tight enough? Because at least if you don't shoot me right now, I have a chance to survive tomorrow, right? Yeah.
And that's what I always sort of remind some people is that be careful how we assume our freedoms and what you think you're free to do, because in the generation that precedes you, freedom, for number one, is always taken for granted. I say it even in religious freedom, because being a person that does go to church, there is this quote that I did see where when you have made your religion optional, your next generation finds it not necessary. And so then there's people that's like, well, I was taking to church every week, so I'm not going to make my kids do that. If they want to go, they want to go. But then as they observe you and your lifestyle, they the fact that of these generations that observe, we got to forget that all they do is watch. All they do is look for what you are, not what you say, not what you even do, really who you are. And your habits and your routine shows who you are. Mm-hmm. I have to even be careful that I'm not on my phone too much, because then I'm noticing my kids would be like, what are you even looking at? They'll come around and be like, you're clearly giving more attention to this thing than me.
I remember once sitting at one of those car detailing shops. And I don't know who they were. I never saw them again. But it was a daughter and her mother. And they came in and sat down. I don't know how the daughter was, somewhere in that early school to preschool age. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how old. It's been too long. But her mom sat down, and the daughter's sitting there next to her. And mom pulls the phone out and just starts doing this business. And is barely paying any attention to the daughter at all. And
Right.
the daughter looks over at me and starts trying to interact with me, right? And she's one of those never meets a stranger type kids, right? And so pretty soon we're having a neat little conversation. I'm enjoying it. And the mother looks over for a second and realizes, sizes me up as somebody who's unlikely to be harmful. And, we continue. And at one point I said something to her about, she's very friendly. And she goes, and she kind of sighs and says something, yeah. But she never really broke away from the phone at all.
Right.
And to me, it was kind of like, you're missing an opportunity here to interact with your daughter. She's not going to be this age for very long. Right. And that was, I don't have children, so I can't speak to what kind of things she may have been going through. She may have just had, a knockdown drag out with her daughter, like an hour before. She may be doing everything she can not to throw the phone at her.
And don't get me wrong, that it could be like that sometimes. But like at the same time, you don't always have that time. That's where even the good book would say, don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice, regardless of what you believe.
Yeah. In ways that I advise, and my wife is great to help me, where even if we've had arguments as a couple, she'll stay up with me and be like, all right, let's get this out because we can't go to sleep on this. Because if we go to sleep on this, your brain will write that as a chapter of reality versus being resolved.
Right.
And there's something that's very important about not allowing this life to go unresolved. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say you got to say what you got to say or do or act in any kind of way, but there's a place that you can meet in the middle for literally conflict resolution. And I think maybe even as a society, we have lost that ability for conflict resolution, positive conflict resolution. We have conflict, no problem. Resolution, not quite the same. And so with that, it is often a very curious space on how we are very quick to run in towards anger, friction, and just malady, so to speak. But then we blame everything else for our peace. Like we don't play an active part in our peace, and that's part of being a peacemaker. Like, yeah,
it's funny because you're talking about anger and our willingness to engage in anger. I have an uncle on my wife's side. He's gone now, but he worked as a counselor, and he particularly worked with perpetrators. Mm-hmm. So really dark people, and he said that working with them, the only two emotions he ever saw were I'm angry or I'm sexually aroused. Everything was like, that was the baseline for them. Nothing else. And to get them to talk about anything else or to think about anything else. So you see how primal that is, right? And so what I'm saying that to say is that I think one of the reasons we go to those things so quickly is that they're easy. Mm-hmm. What is joy?
Oh, you asked very,
that's different from being like, oh, I feel happy right now because I just got a bunch of money, or I feel happy right now because I just got a new toy. What is joy? That's the much more mature thing. And not just that. There's other things. I mean, grief is different. Anybody who's had to go through grief knows it's not a simple emotion. And it's not a simple experience.
Very dynamic.
Yeah. And by the way, I will say this. No one can tell you how to grieve. I know that from personal experience, and I've seen it over and over and over. People grieve differently. And to me, to judge the way someone else is grieving is to make a fundamental error. Because you don't know what's in their heart. You don't know them that way.
And to tag on with that, number one, I hear you completely. And in my help with others is that I've let them know that grief is the urge to love someone and missing them at the same time.
That's well put.
And because of that uniqueness of that love and that relationship and that interaction that you've had, that's why it's also so individualistic. Because no one experienced that relationship the way you did. Nobody experienced that life the way you did. That was your life. That was a part of your life specifically. And that's why it's so, the easy word is rude, but it is so counterproductive when a society always has an input but never focuses on output. Like, we always have something to say about somebody else, but we never actually produce something. That's why essentially as a stock market, that's why the stock market is doing what it's doing, because we're so freaked out about us actually having to produce again. We realize how much we are just completely reliant on the world, and this market essentially represents the trust of our capabilities. That's what it represents in its nutshell. When people ask me what does stock represent, it represents the trust of the company. And so when the market is essentially tanking, we're recognizing we don't trust ourselves to produce what we need to survive, and that's why we're not comfortable. And that's the telltale sign of what has happened in our society, especially in Western American society, is the fact that we depend on everybody else for our convenience. But we're never willing to do the work ourselves, including joy. You need to be my joy. You need to be my peace. You need to be my happiness. You need to satisfy me. You need to make off my list. But then we will do nothing to bring anything to the table that we say should be set for us.
Well, I'm not responsible.
I'm not responsible for your this, that, and the third.
Right. I'm not responsible for anything. Everything's being done to me.
Mm-hmm. Or when I hang out with
in
some
my
people,
defense, I was left unsupervised.
I was left unsupervised. But I've heard some horribly alarming phrases of better you than me. And then when it becomes me, oh, poor me, how come no one's paying attention to me? Because you conditioned everybody else.
Okay, I do think, and this may be, it may be mythical nonsense or whatever, but I tend to believe that we do get back what we put out.
Oh,
I mean, if you want to be if you want people to like you, you need to be likable. If you want to be trusted, you need to be trustworthy. If you want to be relied upon, you need to be reliable.
As long as there are seasons, there will be seed time and harvest. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some truth to that. Now, that doesn't mean that a good person isn't going to get
bad situations.
In bad situations. That doesn't mean that that's not going to happen. It is going to happen sometime or another to everybody. They're going to be put in situations where,
undesirable.
Yeah, in undesirable situations. And sometimes it happens for no reason at all.
Right.
I mean, I remember once living in Norman, Oklahoma, I walked into a convenience store I went into all the time. And for whatever reason, there was some guy there who gave me one of those feral kind of like threatening looks and just said, I don't like your hair. My hair was long at the time. And I was like, he had a friend with him who had longer hair than I did. And said, well, your friend he has long hair. And he says, he's a friend of mine. And I'm just kind of like, going, okay. This person does not want to have a rational discussion about long hair. He wants to pick a fight with me. He looks at me as somebody he can beat up for whatever reason. He's decided he doesn't like me. So rather than buying what I was going to buy, I just turned around and left.
Right.
And he was at the cash register, so he still had to pay for his stuff. So I was long gone by the time he came out. So I just, okay, sure, I could have stood my ground, maybe gotten beaten up, maybe I beat him up, maybe we both go to jail. Why?
Well, they didn't like you.
No, I'm saying why? What's in it for me?
Exactly.
There's nothing in this for me. I don't even know this guy, so it's like I'm gone. But there's a great many people who would just like talk to me that way.
Right. Well, they make up a pride that they also are too afraid to defend verbally.
Well, it's interesting if you go back and read historical novels and historical fiction from the past. I don't know if you've ever read The Three Musketeers.
I haven't read it the way I should, but
it's my wife didn't like that book because everybody in it is looking for a chance to stick somebody with a sword.
Right.
And the slightest insult, and you're going to have a duel. And for historical verification of this, Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. I mean, come on. Aaron Burr was vice president of the United States, and he had a duel with Washington's Secretary of the Treasury, I believe.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about the highest ranking people in the United States government had a duel. Stand, take a pistol, fire it. It's like, that's how they felt like settling issues at that. Andrew Jackson, one of our presidents, was wounded in a duel and killed the man he was fighting. You know, people did that kind of. The Wild West is exaggerated, yes, but at the same time, it was based on something that was really happening. Wild Bill Hickok killed a man in a duel because he lost a pocket watch to him in a gambling game. Hickok got the money and offered to buy it back, and the guy said, I won't sell it. And now, of course, this has been mythologized and turned into every Wild West gunfight ever. So how true this all is, I don't know. But the story, as reported by the serious historians I've read on it, is that he bragged after he refused to sell it back to Hickok that he was going to wear it in the town square at high noon the next day. And Hickok's response was, he'll do that if dead men can walk. Now, we're talking about, that's like pride run amok, right? And the story goes that the man saw Hickok and Hickok saw him, and he drew on Hickok and fired first. Hickok very calmly drew his gun and killed him. And Hickok got off in self-defense. Was it really self-defense? Well, I think he was provoking the guy to the nth degree. He said, if he let it be known,
right,
if dead men can walk, you'll wear that watch tomorrow. You know? So it's like, I'm just saying, we aren't that way anymore, and thank God, nearly as much as we used to be.
My brain cannot get out. By the way, I would like to submit on a whole nother level that Back to the Future 3 is one of the greatest Westerns out there with Biff Tannen.
I need to see that one. I've seen clips and thought it was I thought it was very wonderful.
Are you serious? That's one of my favorite Westerns anyway.
Well, okay, this is something silly. Okay, so what are your top 5 Westerns? It'd be interesting to compare.
Ooh, there we go. All right, so
notice we did a complete change of subject because it was getting too dark and too heavy.
It is what it is. Yeah, we'll lighten it up.
So now we're going to talk about mythology, the mythology of things that are dark and heavy.
The mythology of the West. Because my dad would also like to jump in how some samurai movies, as you also like, it's like it's really just just pick your languages.
Kurosawa watched American Westerns and then created samurai movies based on Japan's mythology and folklore.
So Ran is in there. So Ran.
R.A.N.?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great movie.
So that's actually on my top 5. That's like, because I consider it a Western. And then we've had a conversation about, I think we said Magnificent 8 is a good one watch.
Magnificent 8?
Yeah.
Oh, The Hateful Eight.
The Hateful Eight, excuse me. The Hateful Eight.
One time.
One
maybe.
time.
I wouldn't put it on the top. It's Shakespearean and incredibly dramatic.
It's an asterisk of, wow, you walk out of there like, oh, okay. But then...
But it's very dark.
The way I describe it, Back to the Future 3 is a Western to me. And then, we said... let me pause. The additional tangent is the series Westworld from HBO. Not based off of the movie, Yul Brynner, but the series was, first 2 seasons especially, were incredible. Okay. So it's hard.
I haven't seen that neither.
That's a good one. But then the actual movies that are Westerns, I'm going to go with you about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'll throw that in there. Tombstone for me is now in that movie. And I think there's 4. And then as a 5th, technically, I would also submit, it's not a Western, but it almost was, The Road to Perdition.
Oh, I've heard of that movie. Who's in that?
Tom Hanks and Anthony.
Is that the one where Hanks is a con man?
Yeah, not quite. He's kind of like, yeah.
I wanted to see that. I haven't seen it. It's set in the 30s, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then there's also there's a recent one that did come out recently. I need to revisit it. It's an all African American cast mostly that just recently came out, and it was a Western. And suddenly I forget that name, but it was really good, and I want to revisit that one. And it's within.
Was it made in the 70s or 80s, or is it more recent?
Past 2.5 years.
I think there was one with an all-black cast that was called Posse or something like that came out in the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it.
But what do you got? Number 5, the top 5.
My 5 top Westerns. Okay, number 1, hands down, is Once Upon a Time in the West.
There you go.
I love the music. I like the way the story unfolds. It's almost operatic. And I like, by the same director, I like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Okay. I'll take a page from you and say Yojimbo,
Yojimbo.
which is the basis for A Fistful of Dollars. It's not a Western, but it's a samurai movie, but it's still a Western.
Right.
And I will also say The Seven Samurai.
There you go.
That's a great movie.
Yes.
Which became
Which
two
becomes-
versions of The Magnificent Seven.
Yes.
Tombstone is so good. Tombstone is a really remarkable movie. Everything clicked in that movie. That one's right up there. Yeah. I'll go with that. That's my story for now, and I'll stick to it. But it's not. That. As soon as you start trying to come up with your top 5, you come up with 3 or 4 corollaries. It's
Right.
Like,
And so it's
what
like,
about
well,
that? I don't
I'm
want to
like,
exclude. I don't want to leave this one out. There's a version of called Wild Bill that's about Bill Hickok with Jeff Bridges.
Okay.
I think.
Yep.
And it's good. It's very good. I liked the remake of True Grit with Jeff Bridges. We talked about that movie.
So,
I didn't
I mean,
think it was the greatest Western I'd ever seen, but I thought it was good.
It just all, and I'm gonna find the name of that movie later on, of that recent Western, and I also throw Django in the mix, but it's more of like a Southern versus a Western. But yeah,
Django with Jamie
Unchained.
Foxx, and
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one yet either.
that is another. It's another Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
So you got to brace yourself for gratuitous. It's not even the word. It's like the next.
Oh, you just reminded me. There's one Quentin Tarantino was involved in called Sukiyaki Western Django. You know this movie? It's so silly and it's so much fun and it's so violent. Oh my
So violent.
goodness.
So violent.
Too violent.
And so,
But it's
with that, it's a Tarantino movie. Like, it's almost like you got to
But
say
he
yourself,
didn't,
like,
he
okay,
didn't
I'm about
direct it.
to-
It's a Japanese director,
Right.
I think he was involved in the production, and he has a short appearance at the beginning.
He loves
of
to
it.
do those immediate, like, little cameos, even whenever he's involved.
The thing that's so hilarious about this movie is you've got all these all these Japanese actors, and they're carrying samurai swords, and they're also carrying Western Colt revolvers, and so they either have shootouts or they have samurai duels.
And speaking on your samurai tip, if
It's
you haven't
just
seen
ridiculous.
Shogun on FX,
I have not seen the modern version. I saw the original one with Toshiro Mifune and Richard Chamberlain.
this latest adaptation is absolutely a delight, and so
Okay.
I enjoyed that, and I'm actually going to kind of use that, allow us to wind out, because there's something that we should always take away, is that obviously conflict resolution should not end in bloodshed.
Even though we're talking about movies where it does, but that's different. One thing I believe in catharsis. I believe watching a violent movie for certain can be a way. Wow, cool. Okay, I'm glad that's not happening in my neighborhood.
All right,
Right. The bad guys are all dead. Wouldn't that be nice?
You gotta have Pleasantville after your rotation. It's like, all right, hi Bob. But so kind
Watch a few episodes of Paw Patrol. There we go.
There we go.
Your kids watch Paw Patrol?
No, they actually watch Between the Lions, because we're actually trying to get them to read early. We're wanting them to enjoy phonics and reading as soon as we can. So we read to them. I'm also proud to announce that I've been accepted as a board member of an Austin nonprofit called Education Connection.
Ooh,
we are
they got a good man.
nonprofit that helps to connect the community and their schools by reading to kids 15 minutes a week or something like that. Just go in, read a book, help the kids read to you, and improve our literacy rate in our communities. And so it's so very important that reading, especially now today, like if you do not know how to frame a sentence or read one, you're going to be so far. And it's not about scrolling. It's not about that. It's the fact that even if we're using AI and technology, being able to learn how to speak a language that AI can recognize is important, and how you can get results even out of this particular society. So I'm a big fan of literacy. I'm a big fan of education. And so Education Connection I'm proud to wear that badge.
That's wonderful. As a teacher, I could always tell which of my students read and which ones didn't.
Right.
Because of the quality of the papers that they would write, how they answered questions and stuff on tests, et cetera, where there were written answers. Yeah. I can tell your parents probably read to you as soon as they could get you to sit still long enough to listen to a story. And I know my mother did that to us. She read, certain stories over and over and over to us. And I probably myself read most of the Dr. Seuss books in the library when I was a kid. And I went to the library over and over and over. I can honestly say that my passion for reading was as much of a factor in me getting a job teaching for 20 plus years at Texas State as any other single factor. And it also allowed me to engage with people from a variety of disciplines. Even if I wasn't an expert in those disciplines, I could still have a meaningful conversation with them because I grew up in a small town with a small library, and so I pretty soon exhausted everything in particular genres in that library and started looking elsewhere. So I am absolutely convinced that reading I like what Emily Dickinson said. She said, "There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away." I'm not sure I'm quoting it exactly right. There's nothing like a book to take you away from where you currently are. I'll never forget reading 2001: A Space Odyssey, one of the best science fiction novels ever written, before I ever saw the movie. Mm-hmm. Getting to the end and sitting on the couch and like kicking my feet because I was so excited because I was in this totally different place, and a book can do that to you in a way that, I'm sorry, a film, a play, nothing else can do that to you the same way a book can, because it's just you in your mind being taken someplace, and your mind is doing all the work, not Stanley Kubrick.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think someone described reading as you are interpreting marks and ink abstractness and allowing your synapses to fire in a way to be rewritten. And it's true, like they're literally just symbols that represent ideas, and then those ideas to become concrete abstractness in your mind. And it's something that I've been learning to fall in love with differently, because now I'm in this journey of deeper education for the sake of strategic engagement in nonprofits. And so,
plus you're teaching a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old
all of that.
Yeah.
And so when I sometimes sit down and I read some chapters, I come back and I'm like, wow, I just got smarter. That's cool. Just sometimes walking out of after a good read of encouraging words, and it's not just like I was affirmed or a validation. No, I just learned something. And sometimes we have forgotten that feeling of I just walked out smarter from my interaction with this.
I remember some books that I read that were really a chore to read, but when I finally got finished reading them, I had exactly the same reaction. And then in some cases, by the way, audiobooks can be a boon, because I found a fantastic recording of Plato's Republic and listened to it. Finished it, and I was like, well, okay, I see now why that book is so important and why that's such a big deal. I don't know if I would have ever sat down and just read it.
But now
I could go back and read it, and I already know.
Audiobooks is also a savior for me, especially I'm on the road half the time. But anyway, speaking of time, that's about our time. We're very glad to have a good time with you, and this has been Tuesdays with Morris.
And you can do comments. You can tell us what your 5 favorite Westerns are.
Yeah, what are your 5 favorite Westerns? We want to hear them. I do want to hear them. I need more movies to enjoy. We'll see y'all.
I didn't mention Blazing Saddles. Neither one of us mentioned Blazing Saddles.
You're listening to a frozen truth.